I always thought our relationship was perfect. You know when you meet someone and everything just feels right? We were that couple everyone around us called perfect. When friends or family talked about us, they always said, "You two were just made for each other." And I truly believe that. She wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my partner, my support. Our daily life was filled with simple but meaningful moments. Her habit of leaving little notes on the kitchen table. "Have a great day." Or "Don't forget, I love you." Her smile when she saw me after a long day. Even those days when we argued over silly things like who forgot to take out the trash or why the empty pizza box was left in the fridge. Those little fights always ended in laughter, hugs, and the words, "You're such a goof, but I love you." I truly believe there was nothing that could destroy what we had built together. I remember a few months ago when she said she wanted to get back in shape. Her health became a priority, and I wholeheartedly supported her. "I want to feel better in my body," she said. It sounded great. We talked about it, and I even suggested going to the gym together, but she just smiled and said, "This is something I want to do for myself." Of course, I agreed. Who was I not to support her? I was happy she was working on herself. She started going to the gym a few times a week. When she came back, she looked happy, tired but satisfied. "It was incredibly hard, but I'm managing," she'd say. She even started paying more attention to her diet, cooking healthier meals, and encouraging me to try them. I was only happy for her. At that time, I never thought anything could go wrong. But over time, I noticed changes. She started spending more time at the gym. Her workout sessions stretched into the evenings. She became more attentive to her appearance, even when just heading to the gym. She bought new workout clothes, expensive and stylish, and started spending more time getting ready in front of the mirror, something she hadn't done before. But I chalked it up to her desire to improve herself, to look better. And I was proud of her. Then came the little oddities I couldn't ignore. Her phone was always close to her. Her answers to my questions about her workouts became short and detached. She often seemed distracted when we were together, and her smile wasn't as genuine as it used to be. "It's just stress," I told myself. But deep down, something didn't sit right with me. I wanted to believe nothing was happening, but my intuition wouldn't let me rest. And finally, there was one moment, one small act, that changed everything. We met entirely by chance, though now, looking back, I think it was fate. It was an ordinary evening, and I decided to stop by a coffee shop to get some work done. I chose the quietest corner and got absorbed in my tasks. And then I heard her laugh. It was so light, so genuine that it made me look up. She was sitting at the next table, chatting with a friend, but that laugh, I couldn't take my eyes off her. I didn't even notice when I forgot about what I was supposed to be doing. Maybe I would never have dared to speak to her if not for one small moment. She accidentally spilled her coffee, and a few drops landed on my table. She quickly apologized, looking a bit embarrassed, and I decided to take my chance. "Don't worry, it was worth it. I've never seen anyone spill coffee so elegantly," I joked. She laughed, and that's how it all started. From the very first moments of our conversation, I realized she was special. Her eyes lit up when she talked about her dreams, about how she wanted to see the world and find herself. We exchanged numbers, and I left that coffee shop feeling like I had met someone who would change my life. Our relationship developed quickly, but everything felt natural. Our first date was spontaneous. We went for a walk in the park. We walked, talked about everything under the sun, and didn't even notice how several hours flew by. She was the kind of person you could discuss the most serious topics with, but also laugh at the simplest things. Over time, she became a part of my life. We discovered new places together, tried new foods, and spent entire evenings just sitting at home watching movies. One day, after a tough day at work, I came home to find her waiting for me with homemade pizza she'd tried to make herself and a smile on her face. "I know it doesn't look perfect, but I tried," she said, And at that moment, I realized her care and love meant more than anything else. We had our own traditions that made our relationship unique. Every Friday, we had a home night. We ordered food, played board games, or just talked about how our week went. In summer, we often went out into nature, enjoying the silence and each other's company. Even everyday things like grocery shopping or cleaning the apartment were enjoyable because we did them together. I remember the day I realized I wanted to spend my entire life with her. We were walking along the shore, holding hands. The sun was setting, and the light was perfect. She was talking about her plans, and I looked at her and thought, how did I get so lucky? She was my universe, my support, my happiness. Every moment with her was precious. And honestly, I never thought anything could change our relationship. I was confident we would always be that perfect couple everyone talked about. But life has a strange way of showing that even the strongest relationships can be put to the test. And I could never have imagined that the threat would come from the side I least expected. I can't say it happened all at once. It was gradual, like a slow wave that began to rise and wash away everything familiar. At first, it was little things, nothing suspicious, nothing that would cause serious concern. She said she wanted to go to the gym to feel better. I just want to get in shape, improve my health, she said. And how could I object? I was even proud of her for her initiative. She started with a few days a week, but then it became more frequent, longer, and more intense. She began waking up earlier and going to bed later. Every morning started with her talking about her plans for the day, but the gym was always part of the conversation. She started paying more attention to her appearance, even for a simple trip to the store. At first, it was cute. New workout clothes, expensive sneakers, and new water bottle. She was thrilled to take care of herself. But something about it began to unsettle me. One morning, I noticed how long she stood in front of the mirror doing her hair. It's just the gym, I thought, but said nothing. Another time, I saw her taking photos of herself in a new workout outfit before leaving. She laughed and said, I want to track my progress. It seemed logical, but questions were already forming in my mind. Why so much attention to how she looks? Who is she trying to impress? I began to notice other things. Her workouts became longer. She always said it was because she wanted better results, and I tried to believe her. But with each passing day, I felt like we were drifting further apart. She would come home late, sometimes looking tired but simultaneously happy, as if she'd had the best time of her life. When I asked her how the workout went, she replied briefly, somewhat coldly, it was fine. It was hard, but I managed. And that was the end of the conversation. At first, I tried to explain everything logically to myself. She's just working on herself. She wants to look better. That's normal, I told myself. But at the same time, a sense of unease started growing inside me. I found myself trying to come up with excuses for her changes. I wanted to be a good husband, to support her. But deep down, something was screaming at me that this wasn't just about working out. Then came moments I could no longer ignore. Her phone was always with her, on silent mode. She began laughing more often when receiving messages, but never showed who was texting. Once, when I jokingly asked, "Who's making you laugh like that?" she replied, "Just a friend from work." But her face looked a little tense, and her smile seemed forced. Every night, as she fell asleep, I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, analyzing every detail of her behavior. I remembered how it all began, how open we were with each other, how we could always share our deepest thoughts and feelings. Now there was a distance between us that I couldn't bridge, and it was terrifying. What's happening? Why do I feel like I'm losing her even when she's right next to me? One night, when she came home later than usual, I asked, "How was your day?" She replied, "Fine. The workout was tough." But I noticed she didn't even look me in the eye. Her voice was calm, but cold, like someone hiding something. And that's when I realized I had to find out the truth. Because if I left these suspicions unanswered, they would eat me alive from the inside. And that was the moment when my paranoia became reality. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. You know that feeling when your mind tries to ignore the obvious, but your heart tells you something isn't right? I tried to convince myself everything was fine, that I was just being too suspicious, that it was all in my head. But with each passing day, that feeling grew stronger. Something had changed in her behavior, something I couldn't understand, but could no longer ignore. She started staying out later and later. At first, it was an hour, then 2. The trainer said I could get better results if I spent more time on my sessions, she explained, and again I tried to convince myself everything was fine. But sometimes she came back so late that I'd already been sitting at home in silence, trying to find excuses for her absence. She's probably really putting in the effort, probably doing this for both of us, I repeated to myself over and over. But something about it didn't sit right. And then there was her phone. Once it would just lie on the table or the nightstand, but now it was always with her. Always. Even during dinner, it lay next to her, screen down. If it lit up with a notification, she quickly hid it or responded as if afraid I might see something. I used to be able to pick up her phone to take a photo or look something up on Google, but now it was locked. I first noticed this when I tried to check the weather, and she quickly said, "Oh, let me do it." She brushed it off with a joke, but it left a bitter taste. One evening, I was sitting next to her when her phone lit up again. She didn't even glance at me, just picked it up and replied. I couldn't help but ask, "Who's that?" She answered quickly, too quickly, "Oh, just a colleague. We're discussing weekend plans." But her eyes didn't meet mine. In that moment, I felt something indescribable, a mix of distrust, fear, and pain. I started noticing she often left the room when taking phone calls. We used to be so open with each other, we could discuss anything, any topic. But now she frequently said, "I'll be right back," and went to another room, leaving me in the dark. Each time, I tried to convince myself it was normal. Maybe she just wants a little personal space, I told myself. But this feeling, this weight of suspicion, only grew heavier. The worst part was at night. She had been asleep for a long time, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. My thoughts spiraled endlessly. I kept recalling all the little things. Her smile when she received a message, her calm yet slightly cold voice when she answered my questions, her growing distance. Wouldn't I have noticed this earlier if something was wrong? I asked myself. Yet at the same time, I was afraid to know the truth. Maybe it really was just my imagination? Maybe I was simply being jealous and looking for problems where there were none? I tried to find a rational explanation, but inside, my fear was growing. One day, I decided to check her phone. She went to take a shower, leaving me in the living room. Her phone was on the table, and I stared at it as if it were some forbidden fruit. I knew it was wrong to invade her privacy, but at the same time, I felt like I had to know. I had to find answers to my questions. I reached for it, but then I heard her stepping out of the bathroom. I quickly pulled back, my heart racing as if I had just committed a crime. That moment made me realize I could no longer ignore these suspicions. My intuition was screaming that something wasn't right. But at the same time, I desperately wanted to believe it was just in my head, that I was making it all up. Yet the more I tried to convince myself, the more these suspicions gnawed at me from the inside. It was a typical Sunday evening. She said she was going to bed early because she had a tough day ahead tomorrow. I stayed in the living room, trying to focus on a movie, but my thoughts were elsewhere. Her behavior in recent days had become even more distant, and the feeling that something was wrong was now suffocating me. I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to find the truth, even if it turned out to be bitter. Her phone was on the nightstand next to the bed, her calm breathing indicating she was already asleep. My heart was pounding as if I was about to be caught. All these internal arguments. Was this right? Was this a betrayal of trust? But I simply couldn't wait any longer. I took her phone, trying not to make a sound. When I unlocked it, she had kept the old code I knew. My hands were trembling. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but at the same time, I had a feeling I would find more than I wanted to see. At first, I skimmed through her recent messages. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Regular conversations with friends and family. But then I saw a name that instantly made me stop. Her trainer. Everything was simply labeled Michael. My mind began searching for excuses. Maybe it was just about workouts. Maybe she was asking about exercises or advice. But when I opened the chat, my entire world came to a halt. Their messages started innocently, as I had expected. How do I do this exercise correctly? Or, what's the training plan for next week? But then the tone changed. I read a message where he wrote, "You look stunning today. That new outfit suits you perfectly." And her reply, "Oh, thank you. It was for you." My heart sank. But this was just the beginning. I kept reading, and the more I read, the worse I felt. They exchanged jokes that clearly crossed the line of professional communication. He wrote about how much he admired her dedication, how he couldn't wait to see her at the next session. And she replied, "I'm looking forward to our meeting too." Then I came across a message that became the final straw for me. "What do you think about meeting up Friday after training? We can grab coffee and just hang out without all these heavy weights." Her reply was short but clear. "Sounds great. I'll just say I'm running late." I paused for a moment. In my head, everything was swirling. Anger, resentment, despair. But at the same time, I was shocked by my own reaction. I felt calm, almost too calm. Perhaps it was because, deep down, I already knew the truth. I closed the phone and placed it back where it was. I stood there in the dark, listening to her steady breathing, and I couldn't believe that the person I loved, the person I trusted, could do this to me. I decided to check one more thing. I opened my phone and accessed the GPS app we had installed years ago to track each other's locations. She had always said it was for safety, but now it became my source of truth. I entered the date and time of her recent evenings when she claimed to be at the gym. And what did I see? She was indeed at the gym, but after an hour or two, her location changed. She stopped by a cafe, or, worse yet, a private house. It was his house. I had no more doubts. I sat in the dark, holding my phone, feeling a storm of emotions growing inside me. I wanted to wake her up right then and there, to ask her all the questions. But I knew I couldn't. I needed to think, to decide what to do next. I felt betrayed, deceived, but at the same time, I knew this wasn't the end. What I did next would change everything. The day came when I could no longer keep it to myself. I woke up in the morning with a heavy heart and decided, today I would find out the truth. All day, I tried to act calmly, not to show her that something was wrong. She as always was smiling, but now I saw it differently. Her smile seemed empty, fake. Every action of hers seemed so cruel and unfair, knowing what I now knew. In the evening, she came home after another training session. She walked into the house with a light smile, placed her gym bag down, and quickly went to shower. I sat in the living room, listening to the water run, and my thoughts stormed in my head like a hurricane. How can she be so calm? How can she come home to me after what she's doing? And how am I supposed to endure this? When she came out of the shower, dressed in her favorite pajamas, I was already sitting on the couch, tense with a heavy gaze. She noticed something was wrong. "Is everything okay?" she asked, sitting down next to me. Her voice was gentle, and that cut even deeper. I didn't want to shout, didn't want to get angry. I just wanted the truth, and I decided to go straight to the point. "Are you cheating on me?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost cold. She froze, her face lost its expression, and I saw in her eyes what I feared most, fear and guilt. She was silent for a few seconds, but those seconds felt like an eternity. I repeated, "Tell me the truth. Just say it. I already know." Her hands started trembling. She averted her gaze, then quietly said, "I don't know what you mean." Her voice betrayed her. It was weak and nervous. I couldn't take it anymore. "I saw your messages with Michael. I know you meet him after your workouts. I know you're lying to me." The words spilled out of me, and I felt my heart break even more as I said them. She went silent. Her face turned pale, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. She started saying something, trying to find an excuse. "It's not what you think. I don't know how it happened." Her words were jumbled, meaningless. And then she said it. "Yes, I've been meeting him, but it doesn't mean anything. It was a mistake." I can't describe what I felt at that moment. It was like a knife to the heart, but not a quick one, more like someone carefully twisting it inside me. I sat there, looking at her, unable to believe it. She had destroyed everything we had built together. All those moments, all those memories now felt like lies. My life suddenly lost its meaning. I asked, How could you do this to me? We had everything. We were happy." She cried, repeating, "I don't know. I was confused. I didn't mean for this to happen." But none of her words could justify what she had done. She tried to touch me, but I pushed her hand away. "Not now," I said quietly, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the darkness, feeling my entire world collapse around me. Her words, her tears, her confession, they all replayed in my head like a broken record. I wanted to scream, wanted to be angry, wanted to release this pain somehow, but I just sat there consumed by absolute emptiness. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing. After this, our lives would never be the same. When the pain subsided a little, I realized one thing. Scandal and accusations wouldn't give me anything but more chaos. I didn't want to scream, break furniture, or cry in front of her. That would have been too easy. I wanted her to understand what she had destroyed. And not just her. Michael, this trainer, also needed to see what he had gotten himself into. I decided to act coldly and deliberately, not for revenge, but to show them both that I wasn't someone they could simply use and forget. The next morning, after she left for work, I sat at the table and began searching for a way to contact Michael. He was her trainer, and finding him on social media was easy. His page looked perfect. Fitness photos, motivational captions, a bright, confident smile in every picture. I stared at his grin and thought, this man broke my life without even knowing me. But I wouldn't let him walk away unscathed. I wrote him a message. "Hi, Michael. I think we need to talk. It's important." I didn't give any details, didn't accuse him. I wanted him to respond, and I knew he would. An hour later, I got a short reply. "Hi. What's this about?" His confidence almost made me smile. "It's about my wife," I wrote back, and added, "Let's meet in person. I think it's best for all of us." He took a bit longer to reply, but agreed. "All right. Tomorrow morning, at the cafe near the gym?" I agreed, and my trap was set. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Looking in the mirror, I tried to gather my thoughts. What would I say? How would I act when I saw the man who was partly responsible for the destruction of my family? My inner voice kept repeating, "Don't lose your temper. Keep it together." I dressed casually, nothing noticeable, just comfortable clothes. My goal was clear, not to show how broken I was inside. The cafe was quiet, the morning sun pouring soft light through the windows. I sat at a corner table and waited. My heart was racing, but I forced myself to remain calm. A few minutes later, he walked in. He looked exactly as I had imagined, athletic, confident, with a slightly smug smile on his face. He glanced around and walked over to me. "Hi, you must be Emily's husband?" he asked, extending a hand for a handshake. I nodded but didn't shake his hand. "Sit down," I said, pointing to the chair across from me. We sat across from each other, and the tension in the air was palpable. He looked slightly uneasy, but tried to hide it. "So, what did you want to talk about?" he asked, as if he didn't know. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I know about you and Emily. I know you've been meeting her. I know she's been cheating on me." His face changed for a moment. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see his eyes drop, as if he were searching for an excuse. "Listen, it's not what you think," he began. But I cut him off. "No, it's exactly what I think. And you know it." I continued. "You knew she was married. You knew she had a family. But that didn't stop you. You decided your desires were more important than everything else." He sat there silently, trying to think of something to say. But I wasn't going to give him a chance to justify himself. "I didn't come here to argue or yell at you. I came to tell you that you're now accountable for your actions. And not just to me. I'll tell your employer that you're getting involved with your clients. I'll make sure your colleagues know exactly who you are." His face turned pale. "Listen, it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said. But I was no longer listening to his excuses. I stood up, looked at him one last time, and said, "Live with your decisions. You destroyed what I built for years. I hope it was worth it." And I walked away, leaving him sitting there, confused and stunned. This wasn't revenge. It was my way of showing them both that I wouldn't let anyone destroy my life without consequences. I walked home feeling empty, but at the same time, I knew I was now ready to move on. Without them, I returned home after the meeting with Michael. Inside, my emotions were boiling, but outwardly, I remained calm. I didn't want this moment to turn into a scene from a cheap drama. Yelling, accusations, broken dishes. No, I wanted to make sure she understood the gravity of the situation, that my words would stay with her for a long time. She was sitting in the living room, watching TV when I entered. When she saw me, she smiled, but that smile disappeared the moment she noticed the expression on my face. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to maintain her usual tone. I slowly sat down across from her, keeping eye contact. "We need to talk," I said quietly. She froze. Her eyes betrayed her. It wasn't fear, but rather the sense of inevitability. She knew that everything was about to change. "I met with Michael today," I began. The words came out so simply, but their effect was powerful. She froze. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, but her voice trembled. I continued, "Yes, I spoke to your trainer. Now I know everything. Your messages, your meetings, everything." Her face turned pale, and she began to say something, but I raised my hand to stop her. "No. Today you will listen." I continued. "Do you know what's the worst part of all this? It's not the act of cheating itself. The worst part is how you looked me in the eye and lied. You came home after those workouts, sat next to me, and acted like everything was fine. You made me doubt myself, my intuition, our marriage. How could you do this?" She began to cry, but I felt no sympathy. Her tears no longer had power over me. "Do you know what else is interesting?" I continued. "Michael said it was a mistake, that he didn't mean for it to go this far. He even tried to justify you. But do you know the difference between the two of you? At least he had the courage to admit he was wrong. And you." She looked at me, her lips trembling. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. But I interrupted. "You didn't even try to tell me. You just decided I would never find out. But now I know." I stood up and looked down at her. "I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to argue. It won't change anything. But I want you to know one thing. You destroyed everything we built together. Our memories, our plans, our dreams, they all mean nothing now. And that was your choice." Her tears flowed freely, but I felt nothing but emptiness. Then I did something she clearly didn't expect. I calmly said, "I want you to pack your things and leave. Not tomorrow, not the day after. Now." I can't look at you and feel this pain anymore." She was shocked. "You can't do this," she exclaimed. But I simply nodded. "I can, and I will." I walked to the door, opened it, and said, "You chose Michael over me. So go to him. I'll start over. Without you." She sat there for a few seconds, as if trying to process what had happened. But I stood firm. I would no longer let her control me, my feelings, my life. She slowly stood up, went to the bedroom, and began packing her things. Every sound of her footsteps, every zip of her suitcase was a symbol of the end of what I once thought was my happiness. When she left, I closed the door and sat on the couch. The house was silent, but this silence wasn't heavy. It was liberating. I knew everything would change now. A new life awaited me, and I was ready to start it with a clean slate. After she left, the house was filled with absolute silence. It wasn't the usual silence you feel after a busy day, but the kind that fills the void left by someone important. I sat on the couch, staring at the door that had just closed behind her, and felt a mix of emotions. Pain, disappointment, anger, but also something new, a sense of freedom. Ending things with her was the hardest decision of my life. For years we had been together, sharing everything, dreams, plans, joys. I saw her as my family, my other half. But now, after everything that happened, I realized this chapter was over. She made her choice, and now I had to make mine. And that choice was to move on, to leave her in the past where she now belonged. I started with simple things. The next day, I gathered all the belongings she left behind and packed them into boxes. Each item reminded me of happy moments, but now they felt distant, like a dream. I took the boxes to the garage and told myself, this is the first step. It wasn't revenge, it was cleansing, both for my mind and my heart. I also decided to change my space. I rearranged the furniture, bought new curtains, even hung new paintings. It might seem trivial, but for me, it was symbolic. I no longer wanted anything in this house to remind me of her.